The story revolves around a female Army officer who becomes the first woman to join the U.S. Navy SEAL training. Despite her superiors' doubts, she proves everyone wrong by passing the test while several men quit. The movie opens as a Senate Armed Service Committee interviews retired Army officer Theodore Hayes for the post of Secretary of the Navy. The topic being discussed at the moment is the limited role women are given in the Navy, and Hayes tries to defend this stance. Suddenly, Lillian DeHaven, a senator from Texas presiding over this hearing, interrupts Hayes' half-hearted speech. She contradicts his points and says that the Navy's attitude towards women in the Army as a whole has been historically bad. To prove her point, she brings out a classified file named the Lark Report and hands its copies to all the members of the hearing. The senator presses on with her findings and begins reading excerpts from the report. It contains recorded statements from high-ranking Navy officials who seem to portray women soldiers as less competent, as well as frequently passing misogynistic remarks. In the aftermath of this explosive hearing, the Navy immediately calls for a private meeting with DeHaven. She agrees to the meeting and soon sits down with officials from the Department of Defense, or DoD, in her office. However, the people from the DoD are strictly against letting women in the Navy and have come up with a plan to foil DeHaven's attempts. They present her with an integration plan that says that if a woman trainee is able to pass any evaluation program set by the Navy, they will allow her to join their ranks. DeHaven realizes that it is a trap, as the DoD will pick the hardest training program for the female cadet and make an example out of her. But she agrees to it anyway, as she knows that the buzz created by this program will only help her career. Outside the Senate office, the DoD officials meet with Hayes and discuss which program they should select for DeHaven's female trainee. They agree on the U.S. Navy Combined Reconnaissance Team, or C.R.T., a grueling selection program in which almost 60% of candidates quit before the fourth week, with the third week being particularly intensive and labeled as Hell Week. These male officials firmly believe that no women would make it past the first week. The scene shifts to a naval satellite monitoring room where topographic analyst Lieutenant Jordan O'Neill is working on bringing home a SEAL team from an active war zone. The control room has lost contact with the team, and one official suggests sending additional support to get them out. But this process will take 18 minutes, as the additional support team will require that much time to reach the predetermined rescue point. On the other hand, O'Neill proposes changing the pickup point altogether. She points out that the SEAL team is made up of experienced soldiers who will look for safer exits from the war zone. Thus, even if the direct communication to the team has broken down, they should look for a newer rescue site. She then quickly analyzes the satellite images of the area and pinpoints an area that will cut the rescue time by half. Her plan is given the green light, and exactly after 9 minutes, the SEAL team reestablishes contact with the control room from the same spot that O'Neill had pointed out. They are then immediately rescued, averting a major catastrophe. In the meantime, Senator DeHaven and her team goes through a laundry list of candidates for the Navy's C.R.T. program. She rejects a triathlete for being extremely lean and a champion powerlifter for being muscular, almost like a man. She wants the female trainee to fit the traditional appearances of a woman so that she can prove that any woman can be a part of the Navy, and women don't always need to look physically strong to do so. Her eyes fall on Lieutenant Jordan O'Neill, who has impressive achievements of being an Olympic triathlon contender as well as academically excellent. She also fits DeHaven's bill of being traditionally feminine. After this hectic day at the work, Lieutenant O'Neill joins her fiancé, Lieutenant Commander Royce Harper, who is an operational officer for the Navy. He congratulates her for successfully navigating the sketchy situation, but also warns her not to get too involved in such matters, as she is not a soldier, but an intelligence officer. Just then, O'Neill receives a call and is asked to urgently meet Senator DeHaven in the latter's office. In the next scene, the senator gives the papers regarding the C.R.T. program to O'Neill and explains what the whole deal is. She says that if O'Neill gets through this training, it will open the doors for women to join the Navy in the future. That night, the lieutenant returns to her home and discusses the idea with her fiancé, Royce. But he doesn't sound very enthusiastic about the idea for various reasons. For starters, the Navy C.R.T. is an extremely difficult program that may leave O'Neill with long-lasting physical injuries. She will also have to share training and living space with several men who will undoubtedly objectify her. But if she gets selected somehow, she will be deployed in active duty for a long period of time. Royce says he may not have the patience to wait for her for so long. This hurts O'Neill, who feels like her fiancé is undermining her abilities in their relationship. She is now extra determined to prove everyone wrong and enlist for the C.R.T. program. A few days later, she arrives at the training center, and the commanding officer gives her a separate room, away from the dorm, where all the male trainees sleep. Word soon gets out that a woman has also been enlisted in the program, and the men don't seem to be happy at all. That night, when O'Neill arrives at the mess for dinner, several men scorn and pass misogynistic remarks at her. The next day, the training finally begins, and the commanding officer reiterates that most of the soldiers will not make it to the end of the third week. He then hands over the trainees to Command Master Chief John Gale, who will be their main training supervisor. He is a very intimidating man and does not seem to care that there is a woman among the group. While checking everyone's uniforms, he recites a D.H. Lawrence poem, Self-Pity, indirectly telling everyone to not feel sorry for themselves. Following this, the trainees are first taught how to carry military-grade boats towards the sea and quickly dismount from it. The rest of the training is as hard as it comes and tests their physical strength. Throughout several grueling exercises, Command Master John urges them to quit so that they don't have to suffer further abuse. He has placed a bell in the front of the training yard, and whoever wants to quit has to ring the bell 3 times. O'Neill doesn't get treated any differently from John, but she can't escape sexist remarks from the other trainees. Things get even more dire at night as the trainees are given 4 minutes to complete their dinner. All of them rush towards the kitchen and have to fight tooth and nail to get the food on their plates. But just as they begin to eat it, the trainers start yelling at them to get back towards the grounds. They are forced to shove their food in garbage cans and rejoin the training on empty stomach. This series of extreme routines continues to the next day. Morning changes into night, and the soldiers are trained to withstand the freezing seawater. It is only after this that they are medically evaluated and allowed to eat the same food that they had thrown in the trash can. It is total chaos, but O'Neill sneaks in a piece of bread in her pocket and stuffs her mouth with the rest of the cold food. After the dinner, Command Master John orders them to write an essay on why they want to join the U.S. Navy. But the test is not as simple as it looks. While the tired and hungry soldiers focus on writing the essay, John plays soothing opera music to make them fall asleep. The ones who end up sleeping will get thrown out of the camp. O'Neill takes a bite of the bread she had earlier hidden, and it helps her stay awake during this test. 15 minutes later, John comes back into the test room and orders them to run back out to the training yard. They are to run an obstacle course, which includes staying safe from live firing. O'Neill is informed that she will be given a platform to help her jump over several obstacles. She protests against this, as she wants to be treated exactly like everyone else. But her complaints are dismissed as the Army rulebook states that the obstacle height for female cadets should be lower than that of their male counterparts. During the course, John observes O'Neill refuse to use the platforms and instead goes through each hurdle like all her teammates. On the wall climbing obstacle, she helps her teammates by letting them climb on her back. Despite trying her best to work as a unit, her teammates do not pull her up the wall. It is evident that they still hate that a woman is allowed to participate in a traditionally masculine space. On the other hand, the 20 hours a day training begins to water down several soldiers' mental and physical strength. More and more trainees start to quit, but to everyone's surprise, O'Neill still holds strong. However, she has still not gotten over the fact that she was given a platform to make the obstacle course easier for her. So she tries to talk to the commanding officer to try to get her treated equally in all terms. But she ends up getting sexist remarks from the officer, who makes it quite clear that he isn't liking the idea of having a woman in his camp. Due to being treated like this, O'Neill goes to a barbershop and cuts her hair, giving up her feminine look. Next, she goes to her room, which is separate from the male trainees, and packs all her stuff. She then decides to move into the common hall where all the male trainees sleep. Most of the men in the room have a problem with O'Neill being in there, especially because he has brought tampons with her. Nonetheless, Command Master John notices O'Neill's actions and doesn't take this approach from her very happily. The scene abruptly shifts back to Hayes, who has now been elected as the Secretary of Navy. He and then other men from the Department of Defense aren't too happy with the news that O'Neill has survived 3 weeks in the camp. And even with this experiment being secret, her achievements so far have managed to get on the news. The public are even calling her G.I. Jane since they don't know her real name. Back at the training facility, things have gotten even more extreme, but G.I. Jane is still holding on. In fact, she now trains even harder just to prove all the sexist men wrong. The results can be seen as she loses a lot of body fat and becomes muscular. Meanwhile, the news reporters are really desperate to get a news piece on G.I. Jane, the tough woman to endure the hard Navy training. One day, while O'Neill is showering all by herself, Command Master shows up with a piece of news for her. The senior-most member of her team was admitted into the hospital due to a fractured leg. This leaves her as the most experienced Army official in her group, making her the team leader. Elsewhere, the DoD officials and Secretary Hayes are frustrated by how O'Neill has outlasted Hell Week and even going head-to-head with men. But they're still hopeful that she'll quit after the C.R.T. training, which stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. The C.R.T. training phase arrives, and the trainees are dropped out of an airplane in an unknown location. They must reach a target, get enough information about it, and retreat before being caught. Instead of just a drill to check the physical fitness of the soldiers, C.R.T. is designed to train real-world scenarios. If the trainees request an early extraction from the location that they are on, or if they are caught, they will be treated like real prisoners of war. Unfortunately, during the training, 2 members of O'Neill's team are caught when they refuse to follow her orders. Another member breaks his leg while rushing back to the safe spot. While trying to help him, O'Neill also gets herself captured. They're just trainees, but the officers play it real and don't even help the guy who had his leg broken. They actually torture him into giving them information about the location of the other teams, which in this scenario means quitting. When it's time for O'Neill, she gets questioned by none other than Command Master John himself. With her hands tied behind her back, John starts to beat her mercilessly. When the other training officer believes that it's getting too violent, John just orders him to get out. He then grabs O'Neill by her head and slams her through the door. Then, in front of everyone, he drowns her head in the ice-cold water. He tortures O'Neill to get her teammates to give up information regarding the location of the remaining teams. But O'Neill strongly tells her teammates to stay silent. John then takes the torture one step further and tries to rip her pants off, saying this all could happen in a real situation. Suddenly, O'Neill retaliates and manages to hit John between his legs. She then throws 2 vicious kicks to his body, but John gets up and knocks her out. He then goes towards her teammates, justifying his action by saying he's doing this to make her realize that she isn't born for fighting. Hearing all this nonsense, O'Neill insults John by asking him to kiss her backside. Now all the male trainees cheer on O'Neill and even hoot at the command master to kiss their backsides. Having changed a group of mismatched soldiers from all departments into a team, O'Neill finally earns John's respect. The news of G.I. Jane passing the C.R.T. training gets to Senator DeHaven, who is really happy about this. Following her show of bravery, O'Neill has started to get respect from her peers, who now treat her as an equal and as a friend. One day when she is out with her female friends on a beach, someone secretly manages to click her pictures. Then the pictures are sent to the higher-ups, who question O'Neill of being a homosexual. She gets told that getting her pictures taken with other female officers while she was on training is a disgrace to them and their organization. So as it stands, she will leave training, so the whole photographs are investigated. She wants to continue her training and believes that someone is trying to sabotage her training. But she gets told that once she gets cleared after the investigation, she will be able to rejoin the training from the start, which means everything she went through so far will go in vain. Infuriated by how everyone is trying to ruin her, O'Neill rings the bell 3 times, signaling that she is voluntarily withdrawing from the program. She then returns back home to her fiancé, who has some puzzling news to share. He shows her that the anonymous photographs were sent from none other than Senator DeHaven's office, the very person that wanted her to succeed in order to prove women's empowerment. Turns out the senator was just using O'Neill to further up her name. She wanted her to succeed just enough to scare her male counterparts. And when O'Neill was just about to pass, DeHaven used her as a bargaining chip with the Navy to prevent military-based closings from her home state of Texas. Even when O'Neill confronts the senator about this, she plays it like she doesn't know anything at all. But later on, Senator Lillian comes clean and accepts that she used her to gain political favors. After hearing it from the devil's mouth, O'Neill threatens to expose her. She isn't afraid to talk to the press about how the senator was using a woman to advance her career. With that, O'Neill reports back to training, where she is warmly welcomed by her peers. Now the final phase of the training starts. Before the final training could start, it is interrupted by an emergency that requires the C.R.T. trainees' immediate support. An observation satellite powered by weapons-grade plutonium has fallen into the Libyan desert. A team of U.S. Army Rangers were dispatched to retrieve the plutonium, but their evacuation plan fell flat, and now the trainees are sent to assist the Rangers in their evacuation plan. During the mission, O'Neill is on the verge of getting noticed by a Libyan soldier. So in order to save her, John shoots the Libyan soldier, which blows their cover. Now the Libyan patrol knows about the presence of the U.S. military on their territory, and a confrontation between the two parties breaks out. John James has to get far away from his team. When O'Neill sees the team's map, she realizes that Master Chief is not going to use the route the others believe he will take in regrouping with others. So Master Chief is currently taking the wrong direction and is in some serious trouble. But O'Neill is here to save the day. With the leader gone, O'Neill steps up. She displays a definitive ability in leadership and strategy while rescuing the injured Master Chief, whom she and her teammate McCool pull out of an explosives-laying kill zone. Soon they receive backup and helicopter gunships, which deliver the final assault. And the rescue mission is a success. All those who participated in the mission are accepted to the C.R.T. In the final scene, Command Master John James Ergale gives O'Neill his Navy Cross and a book of poetry containing a short poem, Self-Pity, by D.H. Lawrence, as acknowledgement of her accomplishment and in gratitude for rescuing him.